Hi, and welcome to Terry Talks Movies. This time around, it's Science Fiction Saturday once more. Got a couple of space opera horror movies for you. One of which I've mentioned on the channel before, but I've just got a new release of it, which is a killer release of that film. And the other one I got on 4K because I had some Amazon credit, and I thought, why the hell not? And the two movies are Planet of the Vampires. This is the new Radiance release of it, which is really good. And the 4K one I've got for you, which I really am ambivalent about in some ways. Event Horizon in 4K from 1997. So I'm going to talk about my health stuff, but I'll talk about that at the end of the video. Let's talk about Planet of the Vampires first. Got this edition from Kino Lorber, which is pretty good. I've got some extras on there, but I've heard about the Radiance version and that it was a bit better. So I had a few bucks at the time. And so I ordered it. It took a while to get here. And the Radiance edition is a banger for a start, unlike the Kino Lorber edition. This is all region, which is terrific. And it's got the little all region thing on there if you want to look at it. So that's $1+. It's a nice package as well. Really interestingly done. You've got the reversible cover where you can get the Italian one, where you can get the Italian title if you want to. So you got all that going for you. And the other thing that's kind of fascinating is that Planet of the Vampires was based on a short story, which was in Italian, called One Night of 21 Hours by Renato Pestriniero. And this has a booklet with the short story in it as an English translation, which is kind of groovy. It's a value added that you don't really expect to get with Blu-ray movies. You don't expect to get a short story in a Blu-ray movie package. But Radiance have done it, and because it is such a seminal work of space opera science fiction, it was worth the upgrade. So I'm happy I got that. I'll keep the other one, but because it's in a thin case anyway, it's not going to take up much room. But this version, for me, is the definitive version of it. I don't know whether Criterion have ever done it. I don't think they have. The Radiance edition is primo. We all know the story. A bunch of space travelers in two spaceships get a signal from a planet, so they go to the planet. One of them crashes, one of them lands, and they find entities there that are resurrecting the corpses of the dead crew people, and have also made the crew get murderous towards each other. There's a reason for the aliens to do this. It's creepy. More accurate title for the movie will be Planet of the Zombies, but in the American edition they call it Planet of the Vampires, and in the Italian edition they call it Terror from Space, or Terror in Space. But I noticed a few things this time around which kind of flipped me a little bit on the movie. Not as far as the quality is concerned, it's still a beautiful product. And the cinematography and the way that Mario Bava, the director, put it all together is genius. He had very little resources. He had a whole bunch of leftover rocks and things from some peplum movie that was made in the same studio. And he multiplied them in some interesting ways. He had brought some of them in the foreground and some of them in the background. And he did things like, to make one rock look like two, he mounted a mirror in front of the camera. So the reflection of the rock would look like an extra rock in the scenes. All sorts of trickery that Mario Bava did to make this movie look really interesting. There's props put in the foreground with the actors way in the background. So it looks like they're in a giant set when they're actually just in a normal set with a miniature in front of it. All sorts of trickery done to make this movie look incredibly different from other science fiction movies of the time, but also to give the world a spookiness, which it clearly needed to tell the story in the best possible way. We know the cast. We've got Barry Sullivan, the American import. We've got Nora Benguel, who was actually Brazilian. Everybody spoke their own language when they were recording this movie. You can tell that when you watch it. The Radiance edition also gives you the option of watching the Italian version of the movie rather than the American version. So you get most of the actors speaking Italian, and you get that depth of character that comes from somebody speaking in their own language with their own voice. But as I said, there are some things I noticed this time around that basically gave me a bit of a head spin. First off, the roominess of the spaceship, the depth of the sets, and the way that Bava positions all the equipment in the spaceships makes it look very utilitarian and very antiseptic, and also very non-human, which is quite important for the plot. You also have those leather fetishistic uniforms that the space travelers have, and the fact that the people on the Argos have yellow insignia on their costumes, and the ones on the Galliot have red insignia on their costumes. And the repetition of the little squiggle on those uniforms denotes rank. You have that well thought out wardrobe design, which makes it a little bit more interesting in some ways. You have that weird non-ergonomic seating that is at the consoles on the spaceship as well, which is kind of odd. Most spaceships that we'd seen previously in movies have very comfortable couches or seats with high backs on them. But in this movie, they're deliberately made to look uncomfortable. Kind of weird, but also builds a sense of unease subconsciously in the viewer. And there are little bits of design, like the fact that there's a thing like an ovipositor when the hatch opens on the spaceship. A thing like an ovipositor on an insect or a tail comes down, and the hatch is at the bottom of that curved extrusion from the spaceship, and then the hatch flips downwards to form a ramp. That's an odd piece of design that again builds up that sense of unease and that sense that things are a bit strange. And then when some of the crew members die, the burial rituals that the space travelers have are not familiar to us. They bury their people in plastic bags underneath slabs of metal with odd-shaped headstones, so it doesn't look at all right. And the rituals of how people grieve are very different from the terrestrial rituals that we're familiar with. People aren't allowed to express emotions at a funeral, for instance. There are all these little bits of business that build up to tell us that these people aren't from Earth. And that, of course, lands at the end of the film when you get the little comeuppance at the end. It's all through the movie. The fact that these are not terrestrial space travelers is signaled to us, not with words, but with the way things look, the way people act, the way things are done by these space travelers. And that, again, is a way of building up the creep factor. And the emotional resonances that the characters have are not exactly human in any way. There's no gender chemistry between the male and female crew members particularly. It's almost like there's no sexuality to any of these space travelers. And I'm not saying anything like sexual harassment or anything like that, but just an awareness of gender is singularly not there in this movie. So the characters, in so many different small ways, simply do not act like human beings. And I love that. And it's something I've only really noticed and gone into detail in my head with on this viewing of that film. But once you realize that, it makes it even creepier to watch the movie. Not just the strange things that are taking over the bodies of the dead and the finding of the giant aliens in their spaceship, which of course influenced Ridley Scott's Alien and a whole bunch of other films. But just the feel of the space crew is at a subconscious level very disturbing and very odd and very unfamiliar to us. Now, whether that was a deliberate choice by Mario Bava or not, I don't know, but it's the result of the work he created. The other thing I'd mention about this film is all the forced perspective and the Shuftan process and the hanging of miniatures in the foreground to give something a look of depth and a feel of distance and things like that. Watching this film from that point of view is fantastic. Just watching the way Mario Bava evokes an alien planet and evokes weirdness and strangeness and oddity is a lot of fun. In no way is the movie believable as a space opera or as anything realistic. It's almost in some ways like a theatrical performance where the lighting and the sets and the production design sell the story and they're part of what we're seeing in a very meaningful way. Mario Bava creates the world upon which these spaceships land. Is as much a character as any of the characters in this film. It's part of what makes it such a delight to watch, and having it in Blu-ray definition just makes that so much better. I first saw this in VHS, and even though I did recognize all of the things I've mentioned, the fact that I'm seeing them in high definition is delicious. It's sumptuous. It's interesting beyond my previous viewings of the movie. And the use of all those primary color lights and things like that makes it look stagey and theatrical, but I'm okay with that. That artificiality actually works for the story and it works for my enjoyment of the story. Whereas a movie that has realistic space effects and things like that has a different feel. And I approach it from a different viewpoint than I do something which has got obvious camera trickery to sell the world it's creating. And that way of creating a world and way of creating a mise-en-scène for the story you're telling, for the space opera you're telling, just works. I mean, I buy into the artificiality of it, and I buy into the craft of it, and I buy into the fact that Mario Bava, even more than a director, was an incredible cinematographer in his own films and in the films of others as well. Just that whole package makes this movie much more than just the story it's telling. It's an odd film in some ways because there's no emotional engagement with the characters in any way. The characters are very stiff and formal and alien, but the story drags you along, and the world it creates drags you along. And the magic of Mario Bava's work brings you along, even though you don't particularly care what happens to the characters at all, because the characters aren't emotionally engaging. There's no viewpoint character particularly for the audience in this film. But that doesn't particularly matter because this movie is an experience of itself. It's a whole package of trickery and literally smoke and mirrors in some cases. And I love it for that. There's not another movie that looks quite like it, and there's not another movie that feels quite like it. It plays into that part of me that read old science fiction pulps back in the day. And it feels like a 1940s and 1950s science fiction pulp. Of course, that's what it was based on. But it leans into that aesthetic in just the best possible way. So whether you pick up either edition of these, you're going to have a good time. But I love the editions on this one. Radiance went to the trouble of sourcing the original story, getting it translated, and then printing it up as a booklet. It's one of those value adders that's unexpected but incredibly welcome. So that's the first of the two. A classic of the genre. A classic worthy of being in your collection. Then we get to Event Horizon, directed by Paul W.S. Anderson, who went on to make movies like the Resident Evil series, the remake of Death Race 2000, Pompeii, Monster Hunter, and also a bunch of other stuff you find in op shops on DVD. This one is a kind of cross-genre. It's a horror movie set on spaceships. If you're going to blend science fiction and horror, there's got to be a good enough reason for it to be set on a spaceship, and I don't know whether Event Horizon makes that pitch well. The cast is good. You've got Lawrence Fishburne, you got Jolie Richardson, you got Sean Pertwee, you got Jason Isaacs before his hairpiece. You've got Sam Neill playing the Australian guy who made the spaceship Event Horizon. Story is that a rescue crew on a rescue ship, a spaceship is deliberately designed for search and rescue missions. And they're all very good at working together, and they've seen a lot of shit in their day. It's sent to the orbit of Neptune because the Event Horizon, a spaceship that has the first faster-than-light drive on it, disappeared 7 years ago on its way to Proxima Centauri. And it turns up in a very shallow orbit around Neptune, and it's actually skimming the atmosphere of Neptune. And the crew of the Lewis and Clark is sent, along with Sam Neill's character Billy Weir, to grab the ship, see what's happened to it, do a salvage on it if necessary, but just basically find out what the hell happened. To get there, the crew needs to spend time in water-filled tanks that allow them to survive the acceleration necessary to get to Neptune in a reasonable time. And on the way there, Weir has some nightmares about his wife and about the way she died. So they reach Neptune orbit. All the people are argumentative and don't like Weir because they are a tight crew and don't like strangers coming in. And Billy Weir is not an engaging character at all. He's cold, he's dismissive, he's aggressive. He's just an asshole, basically. And they get there and they find that the gravity drive, the thing that takes them through to Proxima Centauri on the spaceship, has been used, and the crew are missing. But there's a whole bunch of bones and blood around various parts of the spaceship. They find some of the recordings that have been made by the crew, and they are kind of monstrous. And the captain, for some reason, speaks Latin in one of them and tries to warn off people who are coming to rescue them. So there's all of that kind of spooky haunted house stuff. The spaceship, when it turned on its drive and created a singularity, that singularity linked to another dimension, which is hell. And shit happened. And the ship, when it went through that singularity, became a sentient entity of evil, because of course it did. Makes no sense at all. One of the crew members is in the engine room when the singularity drive starts up again, and he travels accidentally through into the singularity and comes back again in a coma because he's basically been to hell and back, literally. And the crew has to figure out what's happening. They start having hallucinations about family members and about traumas in their lives, and shit just descends from there. I don't think it works. I wanted to like this film because I hadn't seen it for a long time, and the first time I watched it, I didn't like it. So I was heading towards being 30 years old, so I thought I'd give it another go. But I don't think it works. I think the horror and science fiction aspects don't mesh together very well. It's a haunted house movie in a sense. It's a demonic possession movie in a sense. And I don't think it needed to be set in space. It could have been set on a remote outpost. It could have been set anywhere. But it's set in deep space because reasons, I suppose. The production design is good. The design of the spaceships is good. The design of the space suits and the tanks and all that other stuff is good. The actors are good. But one of the problems we have with this movie is, with any of these kind of movies, one of the anchoring points that an audience has is having a viewpoint character. The character who we latch onto emotionally and whose experiences we vicariously live through. We don't have that in this movie. At first you think it's going to be weird. And by the way, I love the fact that Sam Neill changed the Australian flag to put the Indigenous flag where the Union Jack is in modern times. All credit to him for that. But we think Weir's going to be the viewpoint character, and then he turns out to be the one possessed by the evil entity who goes totally nutso. So he's not our viewpoint character. We think it might be Miller, the captain, played by Lawrence Fishburne. And to a certain extent that's true, though the movie doesn't use him as that anchor point in any real effective way. We think it could have been Jolly Richardson's character or Kathleen Quinlan's character. None of them get enough space to inhabit those characters in a way that makes them a viewpoint character. I am told that there is a longer version of the movie that was never completed, and the movie was cut down to 98 minutes because the suits wanted it to be 98 minutes. And it was edited quite quickly. There was a 4-week edit process because they wanted to get the movie out. I don't think there's enough meat on the bone, from what I've seen, for it to function well as a movie like this should function. Viewpoint character is so important. We need to know who the person we hope survives is in this movie. In any of these kind of movies, even if that person doesn't survive, we need to know who that person is in a horror movie. And this movie does not deliver that. Which isn't to say most of the actors aren't doing a good job. Fishburne as the captain is really good. Charlie Richardson's good. Sean Pertwee's good. Jason Isaacs is good. All the surrounding characters are good. Here's one of the problems I have. And I've noticed this in a couple of things. There are movies in which Sam Neill is miscast. And when he's miscast in a movie, he's fucking awful. He was miscast in Possession. I saw that for the second time late last year at Cinemaniacs. And I don't think Sam Neill was good in that movie. And I don't think Sam Neill is good in Event Horizon. I don't think his character has enough character for us to care when he suddenly turns into a mad, disfigured, demon-possessed creature. There's no, oh shit, for the audience in that. It's just like, oh yeah, okay. Doesn't have that emotional engagement this kind of movie needs. And horror movies in particular need that one character, and it just doesn't have it. And it annoys me. From a technical point of view, no notes. The production design is great, though it is a little bit Geiger influenced in parts. I think it's a little dark. There could have been a little more light thrown on the sets, which means that when lights go out or when light shifts, it becomes more of a impactful thing for the audience. It just didn't work for me. I don't know whether it was the blending of genres just not being done in an adept way, or it is that problem of not having a viewpoint character or having a lot of the characters drawn very well. Most of them just have one quality. Kathleen Quinlan's character, who's one of the medics, has a son. We know she's got a son, and she's got a problem with her ex-husband. They've just broken up, and her ex-husband's got custody of the son while she's away. That's all we know about that character. She's a mum. Jolly Richardson character we don't know much about. We don't know much about Miller, the captain, played by Lawrence Fishburne, apart from the fact he's the boss. And we know that Sam Neill's character, Weir, has a wife who ended her own life. That's all we know about the characters. There's not anything there beyond those little tick box qualities that they have. And I think that's definitely a flaw. We need to know a lot more about some of these characters to give a shit. Now, a lot of people are revisiting this movie and saying that it's an unsung masterpiece. But I don't know whether that's nostalgic wish fulfillment or not. It just doesn't play for me. I know this didn't cost me anything because I used Amazon credits for it. but I kind of don't like the fact that I've got it on 4K. I have enough goodwill towards a movie to want it to have been better than it is. And that's the most annoying kind of movie there is. The ones where you kind of like it enough to wish it was better, and it's not, and you watch it and it pisses you off. Even though a lot of people will have a higher opinion of Event Horizon than I do, I just simply didn't. It just didn't work for me. I'm going to do this thing that Julian over Collective Creations YouTube channel does. I've got a digital code for this movie, and I'm going to hold it up, and the first person that gets it, gets it. So there is the digital code for the movie. I'm not going to ever use it, so if you want it, and you grab it before anybody else does, terrific, use it. And people should check Collective Creations, because Julian's always fun when he's talking about movies. Yes, Event Horizon disappointed me, and I'm cheesed off about that a bit, but I'll get over it. So these are the two movies I've got. Now, health update. I've taken all my antivirals. I've finished the last of them today. I've still got a bad taste in my mouth from the antivirals. They give you a metallic taste in your mouth, which is a lot of fun to experience. And my sense of smell is still half gone. But I'm on the mend. I'm going to take a rat tomorrow, and hopefully I'll come up clear and everything will be hunky-dory. I don't see any long-term repercussions of having the spicy cough, and I'm happy about that. It is what it is, and it's been a pretty shit week because of that. Sitting around the house, taking antivirals, and having all the side effects of that isn't entirely pleasant. But I did watch a lot of movies. So let me know what you think of these two films, by the way. This one, of course, I can't see anybody saying anything bad about. This one's a little more problematic. Let me know what you think. Leave a comment. Also, it'd be nice if you're subscribed, hit the notification button, give it a thumbs up, and of course, leave a comment. You can also support the channel by donating through YouTube, becoming a YouTube member, or by becoming a patron at patreon.com/TerryTalksMovies. Got the Monday video to do, and I've got a couple of interesting things for that. But until all of that stuff happens, watch some good movies, watch some bad movies. Watch this movie rather than this movie. And I'll catch you next time.